So welcome. Thank you. Welcome to our first meeting of the year, the PSHE Teachers Network. We are a network of teachers here to support other teachers, looking at specific things relating to PSHE. And today we are going to be talking about how do we support our Key Stage 5 students. And this is a topic that is very open-ended because there is literally no guidance as to what should or should not be included in this. I am delighted to be joined by Rachel, who is assistant head at West Somerset College Sixth Form and in charge of Key Stage 5, and by Maggie, who is from Wolverhampton Grammar School. And Rachel's going to be talking to us about the programme that she's put in place at her school, and Maggie's going to be talking to us about the trickier issues that we might want to cover with our Key Stage 5 students. So just as a reminder that this will be recorded, there will be a link to the recording provided on that live document. And if I feel that if you have any questions, can you please put them in the Q&A section on the button along the bottom of your screen, and I will scan through those as Maggie and Rachel are presenting. And if I feel that at that point that question is relevant, I will ask it of the presenters. If not, I will leave them to the end of their presentations. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Rachel to give us her presentation. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you, Bex. So as you can see plastered on that screen there, I think the context is really important. And perhaps what I'm going to talk about is more the process of how we've gone about putting together our personal development PSHE curriculum, rather than the product itself. And I think that's probably the most interesting thing from how we've gone about this, which may be of interest. So I think West Somerset College, we are in Minehead, and our context is really, really important. So we're both coastal and rural. We have the second largest catchment area of any school in the country, so 66 kilometres squared. Our students live in all sorts of villages out in the sticks, ranging from Devon all the way up to the Quantocks. And so transport is an issue that presents a few barriers. It's a beautiful part of the world, but it does present barriers. And I mention this because really my thinking, I'm relatively new here. I joined in Easter, and I was in a bit of a privileged position really, where there was previously not a lot in terms of a PSHE structural program. As Bex mentioned, of course, we know that there isn't a lot in terms of guidance, but that's also quite liberating. And my kind of thought process here at the beginning was, how can we create something that isn't just an off-the-shelf program? How can I look at the needs of this really specific community, and what process might I take to hearing their voice and looking at what we know we'd like to develop in our learners to make them better equipped really for this really key phase of life between 16 and 18, when they're about to go off out into the world and do great things with their lives. That was the start point. And just to mention again, the start of this process, I realize will be different for every school or setting, but for us, a massive part of what we want to achieve through our PSHE and personal development is really getting our students to be more ambitious for themselves in many ways. So, for example, knowing in our context that progression to higher education statistics roughly look like 77% progression to higher education, by which, of course, we mean level 4 plus apprenticeships or largely university. The Southwest figure, actually, this may surprise some people if you're not from the Southwest, is the lowest progression rate to higher education of anywhere in the country. Not necessarily what we imagine when we think of the Southwest. So this is largely referring to Devon, Cornwall and Somerset. And we're very much, as a college and as a school, within this kind of category, really. So thinking about what some of those barriers are for students being more ambitious for themselves. In addition, this is absolutely essential. Looking at our cohort and our community, West Somerset as an area ranks lowest for social mobility in the government social mobility index from 2016 that it did. I think actually it phrases it as first worst, which is nice. What does this tell us? This tells us we've got a community where actually we have really high employment rates, for example, but we also have a lot of people who are working below the living wage. So lots of people have jobs. Neat figures aren't necessarily an issue, but it's about raising the ambition and really getting students more aware of the horizons beyond where they live, whilst also making people proud of being a part of that community and responding to the needs of this really particular community that we have. And so the start point was trying to understand some of that through student voice, talking with parents, talking with staff. and looking at a bit of a blank canvas and saying, how can we develop some of these traits in our students? And so really thinking from the point of view of development needs, first of all, what do our students need? So through conversations and getting to know some students, and one of the first things I did was finish off some sixth form interviews from year 11s. I realized that a lot of them had great ideas, but their articulacy wasn't fantastic. So how can we develop our students so that they are more self-confident in the way they express themselves? Resilience, certainly, as a personal skill. Knowledge of their own strengths and areas for development. So I'm including careers in some of what I'm talking about here, but that classic careers question of, tell me about your strengths or areas for development. Students really finding it very difficult to know themselves and have knowledge of their own areas of strength and qualities that they have, and being able to articulate those well. Getting them to have higher aspirations for themselves, whether that's university or any other route. And feel, crucially, I think sometimes when you do that can be easy to say, get out of here, there's not a lot in the area. And actually, it's about making someone feel really proud to be part of that community. Yes, to be aware of what's out there, but to bring back in that expertise and be proud of where they're from. And so that was some of the start point. Now, very similarly, another question came about for us to kind of line of inquiry of what are the qualities and personal skills we want to say after our students have been with us that we've helped them to develop, and certainly within the sixth form. And some of the things that perhaps we felt we could model better and make more explicit were around delayed gratification. So, for example, for us, a lot of our students will have part-time jobs, and that may seem a priority, which feeds into the picture I painted before. And so how can we make sure we're informing students of those choices and the impact of those choices, and the impact of staying in education longer and the value of their education and those personal skills. There is a study skills element to this as well, in terms of actually being equipped to learn, self-regulation that goes with that in all its senses, but also the ideas of gratitude, mutual respect, regardless of background or identity. And part of this as well, which doesn't quite sit necessarily neatly, but is engaging students in current affairs, participation in democracy, knowledge of kind of, exactly, their community, and being active participants in that, rather than having the narrative told for them. How can they write themselves into it? And so I know those all sound at the moment quite lofty and vague skills that we probably all would say, yeah, we want to develop that in students. But that was the start point, through talking with students. And some students could articulate this themselves. They knew that they weren't that self-confident, for example, or they wouldn't feel that they knew exactly how to study, how to get themselves organized. They might not necessarily know much about people from other communities, etc. So there was a level of student voice as well. So the next step then was to kind of work that into, you may remember from the first slide, there was our vision of an ambitious and inclusive sixth form community. And each word in there was really carefully thought through. And so our big themes of ambition, inclusion, and community feed through. Roughly, what we did is then look at, well, let's get these themes as traits and the things we want to work at, and put those into a package that throughout the entire tutor program, and I'll show you how this fits together in a moment, how can we build that into that program really explicitly? So Autumn 1, is, for example, this term now has just been about ambition. And the key ideas feeding through every tutor time. So I'm seeing PSHE really as a part of it's kind of a strand that we're calling the whole thing our tutor curriculum. The power of education in social mobility, raising aspiration, delayed gratification, and taking personal responsibility. And those are the themes that run through the whole tutor program that we're running. And that's kind of the key thing. And you can see the way that we've organized some of the other ones as well. At this kind of stage, Bex, I think it was with yourself, I remember I'll show you the exact spreadsheet I have actually, which is still refined. I started then going, right, I need lots and lots of feedback. I need lots of ideas. And I think maybe I would say the strength of this is precisely the fact that it's not just me. I've kind of done a bit of work, and then I've gone out to anyone and everyone that passes me and said, give me feedback. At what could I do for this? What great resources do we have that would help us work on this? And that was really the next kind of step that we took. In terms of organizing what this looked like, roughly, this is the schedule that we follow. We have a daily tutor time in the morning. So we looked at the academic habits of success on a Monday, careers, the personal development, I'll come to what exactly we mean there. And then the assembly, which again will be talking through those themes. And then you'll notice, very excitingly, the debating on the second week, every other week. So they'll complete debate research on the Thursday, and we have the debates on Friday. And I'll show you those in a moment. By far, my favourite bit, I think, of this. But the idea is that as a fortnight, they're not standalone sessions. So that theme runs throughout the whole chunk. And I think perhaps if I show you the overview in a moment, that will make more sense. So this is a slide that I share with the students on their first day to challenge their kind of perception of PSHE, I think, as well. Some students might not always kind of fully understand what's in it for them. And I think that's always important with PSHE, is narrating and being really clear about it. And so these are some of the organizations, universities that I went to and said, we want to do some sessions relating to this. And partly being a school that is in an area where widening participation will be top of lots of universities' agendas, as because we have a low progression rate in this area to university, but also just generally, I have found instant replies and people really very willing to contribute resources, live sessions. This morning we had the University of Plymouth in. Tutor time was some students talking about life at university. Then they set up a market stand in the entrance of our sixth form with prospectuses and answer questions. But lots of organizations that are really, really helpful. Finance, in terms of taking delayed gratification and through the theme of personal finances, etc. I'm sure many of you be familiar with things like the NatWest Money Sense. But what's great about Money Sense is it specifically has a program tailored at Key Stage 5. So it's kind of really age appropriate, free to use resources. If you don't already know of the great stuff from the University of Newcastle, in particular, I mean, geographically, we would never be able to organise a trip there. That would take a very long time, the other end of the country. But their outreach work and specific programme of freely available resources to sixth form students in particular to bridge the gap of academic skills and life skills in between being 16 and getting ready to go to university are absolutely amazing. And they will run you can book free webinars for you, live sessions on plagiarism, referencing, all sorts of really great stuff. I can't recommend their work highly enough. So I went out to the Careers and Enterprise Company as well, our coordinator that I know lots of schools will have affiliated with for their response from sort of industry personal skills. What do employers want in terms of development of those personal skills, and had some really useful feedback on those and challenging my own thinking actually, which I'll share with you in a moment. And Singer Instruments is an example of a local company. It's a robotic, a lab that make they create robotics equipment for science laboratories. So that's pretty cool. Basically, the moral of the story is I reached out to absolutely everyone and anyone, and there will be people presenting live coming in as part of this curriculum. And they'll be aware of what the themes are that we're trying to bring out. So in terms of an overview, this is what then a half term would look like. So that would be one of the fortnights I described, where over the period of that first week, everything feeds through. So, I mean, the first week is kind of setting up some of your welcome to sixth form. But as you can see, social mobility, we had an education, a sort of an assembly on social mobility. Next Step Southwest, for anyone in the Southwest, is fantastic at some of these. Lots of things on kind of raising aspiration, etc. And then this culminated in a debate with the motion. And the motions, by the way, are always intended to be very inflammatory and make you take a ridiculous stance. So this is the point, to polarize a little. We should abolish private school education. So that kind of feeds into where we've learned about social mobility, we've learned about aspirations, we've learned about this, and I'll show you how we prepare students for those through their articulacy. But it gives them an opportunity to reflect on in quite a mature way, and engage with some issues from current affairs as well, things to do with personal development, but applying those then to what we're seeing with current affairs in the world. Last week's debate was about AI in education being a threat. Is it a threat or is it positive, for example? So you can see as we move through then how this inclusion one here, all of these will fit in together and culminate in a weekly debate, which is an opportunity to reflect on those and kind of think about where our opinions lie. And it's important, I think, the ground rules for some of this debating. Obviously, when we're looking at things like a statement such as feminism is irrelevant in the 21st century, you're obviously going to get some opinions there. I think also upskilling your team of tutors who run this is really, really important, and some of the resourcing around that as well. So this is just some of how we've chosen to do this. But yeah, there is a working document and a work in progress. I thought it was really important for workload purposes for our tutor team to make sure that there was a real quality resource underpinning this as well. So just from that point of view, much as many of the resources were provided very generously by lots of universities, fantastic people in outreach teams, industry, with their kind permission, I've pulled those resources together so that the student has a booklet that on Monday, this is what we're doing. And there's something about having the physicality of a booklet and it being really organized and student responses being noted that really, I think, raises the profile as well of what we're doing. So I did want to show an example just because I love the debates of, so we talked through at the beginning why we're doing our debating. We don't need to actually watch this video, but the AI one, for example, so we spent a long time talking about how we should participate in these debates and the means of participation. So what students would have typically is a motion that feeds in with some of the things they've talked about in the last 2 weeks. We then provide QR codes for students to be able to conduct research, and in their booklets, they would note down some statistics, some thoughts on both sides to get them to weigh up both sides of the argument. We think about the biases in these different sources, and I always try and give a spread of different sources as well, and kind of reflecting on how does this kind of lead in. And then on Friday, they'll have the debate. Really important to set, as with anything with PSHE, really clear means for participation. And then we provide for our articulacy so that over time students will develop articulate ways of expressing their opinions and listening to each other. I think the listening to each other is really important and building on each other's ideas. Some sentence starters for them to eventually use. And to begin with, for this half term, the tutors are chairing this, but over time it will become a student who will take ownership of chairing the debates as well over time. And so I think for us, where I was seeing students not very confident, and still sometimes now we're having to, the prep work's important because at the very least they have their opinions written down that they can share if they wish to do so. But over time, getting us used to public speaking, engaging in current affairs, engaging in some of these issues around personal development as well, I think is really positive. And students were quite hesitant when they heard the idea, but as soon as I thought this might happen, as soon as the debate got going, they got quite into it in each tutor group. And what we do at the end as well, just to model democracy, is that we do an eyes to the, so they'll do a vote within their tutor group. The tutor then has a link, submits it, and in the next week's assembly, I reveal the result. So we have 4 tutor groups in our year 12. So this week's one is actually a split. They don't know that yet. So I don't know, haven't decided yet what would be a fair way to decide who wins this debate. But very interestingly, even though they passionately could see some of the things to do with social justice, etc., they all voted. There was one missing because it wouldn't work. That told me no, they disagree. They think we should not abolish private schools. But I tell you what came out of that was loads of really great arguments about education, equality, based on some of the finance things and social mobility stats they've learned, and about choice and making informed personal choices, which is exactly what we want to come out from this. So that's been really cool. Oh, and that was just this morning with the University of Plymouth in our fair. A final thought, really, just as with any curriculum, and is to say that this is new and we've rolled this out now this year. And so we're in a process of monitoring before, as anybody's who's looked at curriculum, it can be easy to get carried away. And curriculum really isn't a document, as I've shown. Curriculum is the happening, of course, in the classroom. And so getting feedback is really important to us. So we have a monitoring document which just shows us some of the strengths. There is a series of questions that we have as well, which I'm happy to share the resource to get student feedback. And we have a learning mentor who's probably a little more neutral than if I were to sit in front of the students and say, what do you think of the curriculum I've spent ages putting together? So we're using the student voice to continually assess how well we might have pitched this, as well as sort of feedback from tutors, etc., and to make sure that we're pitching that right. And if any emerging needs or interests are coming up. For example, one that's come up is obviously this first unit, I suppose, has been quite heavy with university visits, and that's been really positive for the majority. But we have some students who would like to know more about apprenticeships and have a variety of speakers from industry. We did already have some of those things booked, but I think it's really important feedback and actually quite valid if I look at the balance of speakers that they've had so far, for example. So that is something that we can take on board and say we've listened. We're putting in some of these, a variety of speakers moving forward. I think that was it in terms of presenting our process so far with our curriculum.
Thank you, Rachel. So I will confess that I actually know Rachel very well, and I used to work with Rachel, and I was kind of there at the start, so I can see the massive amount of work that has gone in to this process. Having looked at the questions, was one from Nicola that says, I'm struggling to include all the careers things and making sure I meet the statutory obligations for RSC. Do you have any advice for finding a balance? I think I just need to say at this juncture that I don't believe, unless it's changed in the last short while, that there is any statutory obligations at Key Stage 5. So in terms of finding a balance between careers and RSC, I mean, Rachel, do you have any advice?
Yeah, I think it might be worth bearing. Sorry, I can't see the questions there, but could you just, Nicola, do you have a daily tutor time as well? I think with a daily tutor time, it does give you a bit more scope, but I know not all sixth forms have that, and we're quite fortunate. I should mention really that our tutor time is a really decent chunk of time, so it's 35 minutes every morning, so it does give you enough time to kind of get into some of these issues. But yeah, time is always really difficult, and I think careers does take on a different kind of importance and meaning to students perhaps at that stage of their education. So for us, I'll be able to answer better when we've got to it. I think it was, if we look at the overview as part of our half term 3 or 4, we as part of our kind of healthy living theme, we have got, and in the next one, which is about informed choices, that's where we've got our RSE at the moment, but we haven't actually come to it yet. So I think it's a good question, but I do think some of the careers work as well can be blended in. So we're quite lucky. Our careers provision here, and even before I got here, was really fantastic, and we are fortunate to be at 100% on the Gatsby benchmark. So it may be because we're covering everything already in the program that's up and running. I don't know if that makes it a little easier, but I think assemblies are a really good one with careers as well, to hit kind of getting in different speakers and different types of employer encounter and things like that. I don't know if that's fully answered the question, or if anybody else, or if Maggie, you had any other thoughts on that?
Hi everyone. I think time is generally something that we never have enough of as teachers, generally, isn't it? And I think whichever subject we're teaching, and whatever we're doing, we always feel like we need more time. So it's about sort of really planning whatever time that you have got really sort of carefully. So I'm quite lucky, and I'll talk to you a little bit about how we structure things at my school, but we've got lesson time and tutor time. We've got some of the programs as well. We certainly, for careers, we take advantage of things like Green Careers Week, and we do events around that. So it's not just within sort of lesson time or tutor time. We have events as well. And like Beck says, in terms of statutory requirements, not as such. However, when you've got an inspection, they're certainly going to be looking to see what you're doing at Key Stage 5, whether that's Ofsted or ISI. So a little bit of a contradiction there. So I think, you know, it's good for our kids that we do a strong personal development curriculum, and so as much time as we can get in talking to SMT and or SLT, as you may call it, and making sure that there's that time investment there. It's tricky. We all need more time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've got so Nicola just qualified and said she has PD for 45 minutes, but it's not in tutor time. So I'm guessing
Right.
that's one lesson a week for 45 minutes. And then
that's
asking, do we have timetabled PSHE, or is it primarily covered in the tutor time? And I think for West Somerset, it is all covered in tutor time, but every tutor time of the week is linked somehow into PD and developing those ideas and those skills.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think, just to come back with careers, I think another really important thing and reflection we've had is the importance of that being integrated as well, as with everything, but integrated and led with within subjects as well. And so that's another really effective way of certainly when we start thinking about things like LMI, etc. So having but that's another piece where we have to make sure that we've upskilled teachers as well. And so we're quite fortunate some of those employers are running some workshops for us on how to promote and make use of LMI within your subject, etc. So I can pass details on. Singer Instruments, I know they're only local to us, but they are a really fantastic company for anyone, especially with like STEM careers and things like that. Really great.
Okay, so Nicola's qualified that she's been told by head of PSHE that we have to include relationship and sex education for years 12 and 13. And can we clarify? I think whilst there isn't any specific Key Stage 5 outcomes, that actually you do need to have a programme which, I mean, as much as Rachel qualified earlier on, that the programme that she's developed for West Somerset is really bespoke to West Somerset is really bespoke to the needs of the students in that school. I think at Key Stage 5 it'd be really difficult. There will be off-the-shelf curriculums that you can buy and lessons that you can download from various different organisations, but it's really important, I think, to develop a curriculum around what do you need locally, what are your main issues locally, and also what do the students want. Okay, surveying the students about the things that they feel that they need to have more information on and more opportunity to explore those ideas and develop those skills. So I think for Nicola, it would be really key for you to sort of have that discussion with your year 12 and 13s and look at what does your local data show you. So things like medical, like health data, careers data, you know, all of those things. I did all of that stuff for West Somerset sort of a couple of years ago, looking at you know, what is the local picture, and presented that to the students so they understood why we are teaching them PSHE as well, why we're covering it at, and not just at year 12 and 13, but I did that with the lower school there as well. So yeah, I think that's the case. I mean, at Key Stage 5 it's even more wishy-washy than it is at a Key Stage 4 and the lower key stages. So I think having a program that's well thought out and based on what your students want and the local need is really important. I hope that answers your question. And Kerry has asked, can we share an example of the monitoring overview? Could you share that, Rachel?
Sorry, yes, I can. 1 second. I'm actually going to unshare, then share again, just to make sure that I've got the right thing open. One moment. Am I still sharing my screen?
I can still see your monitoring year 12 curriculum overview.
Okay, hold on. I don't know if you had any other questions Maggie could help with whilst I faff with technology, Bex.
You could probably just click on the link at the top, year 12 tutor curriculum.
Yeah, hold on. I should. Yeah, it should be. Yeah, so we've got, this is our monitoring schedule here so these just refer to SAS, by the way, is not terrifyingly the SAS coming in and monitoring it, that's the staff initials, just to qualify. So this is myself and then my head of year 12 and 13, and these are the elements that we would drop in on. We then have a series of different questions at the side here. So some of these relate to the kind of things we're just interested, like that Ofsted may ask about sixth form generally. If someone from another school asks, how does West Somerset get sixth form give students personal development opportunities? So for example, here, this one that's just coming here, I'm not sure. That's really important that we need to make, and informs me, we need to make sure we keep explaining why we are doing these things. Now, again, this is another one for us. The articulacy of some of our students, it's not that they don't value these things, they're just not always very well, you know, it's about developing articulacy. So yeah, and then we've got some other questions on here. What about the tutor debates? How would you tell me about the enrichment opportunities and offer, etc. So then those questions will feed in, and what I will do at the end of this half term is summarize the overall strengths here and overall areas for development. So those are the ones from student voice, and then we'll use that to inform our next half term. And it really is at the moment just taking it a half term at a time, even though there is that overview, because what I don't want to do is run too far with something that's new without making sure it's right. So and of course, like with anything, we don't just say, oh, the students say they want to have, you know, McDonald's every morning and tutor time, and okay, great, that's what we'll do. But I do think there's a real value in listening to what students want from this as well.
Excellent, thank you, Rachel.
Yeah.
So
No,
we don't have any more questions, so Excellent, thank you. Well, I'd like to welcome Maggie to present to us. Thank you, Maggie.
Thank you. My screen now. If you could let me know if you can see my PowerPoint.
It's not coming up yet. It says you started screen sharing, but there's no PowerPoint there.
Now PowerPoint, how about now?
No, you are sharing us the Zoom call.
Okay, it should be it.
Yep, there we go.
Yep, have we got that? Brilliant. Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. So my name's Maggie. I'm speaking from a very different part of the country. My school is in Wolverhampton. It's Wolverhampton Grammar School. We're an independent school, and we serve quite a mixed area. We have a lot of children that come over from Shropshire, Staffordshire, so some quite rural areas. We have some from Birmingham, not very many. We're not as close to Birmingham as what people might imagine from the accent. But certainly we've got sort of a very mixed group of children. We have about 50% of Black and Asian heritage, so a very diverse background of children and lots of things to get stuck into with PSHE. So I'm head of Wellbeing at Wolverhampton Grammar, so that means that I'm in charge of all of the PSHE and RSE curriculum. I also do a lot of work on equity, diversity and inclusion. I'm safeguarding lead, and I'm at the moment doing training to be designated mental health lead too, hopefully in the future. And I'm also currently writing a book called PSHE and Sex Education, What Every Secondary Teacher Needs to Know, and that's going to be published next year. So that's just a little bit about my background. So I'll talk a little bit about how we do things at Wolverhampton Grammar, and sort of talk about some of the trickier conversations as well that you may encounter as the children get older. So what's different at Key Stage 5? So obviously we've got a higher proportion of sexually active students. That's definitely a consideration. Relationships become more serious and time consuming on top of the studies that the students are taking part in. Generally A levels and so on take up a lot more time, and students can no longer be withdrawn from the RSE element by their parents, and instead can then choose to themselves to withdraw or not. So there's some key changes there that happen between stage 4 and 5. But for us, what we really want to do is to prepare the students for adulthood, get them ready for the next stage of their lives, both in education, work, apprenticeships, whatever it might be that they decide to do. And also the fact that they're going to have more freedom. So they're going to be going out more, there's going to be more parties, they're going to start having some of those first experiences of, you know, responsibility that they may not have done so before. So when we teach particularly sexual health in Key Stage 5, we look at sexual health holistically, so not just the physical aspect to sexual health in terms of STIs and contraception and so on, but also about sexual emotional health, and talking about what the consequences are perhaps of having a one-night stand, what the consequences of waiting until marriage or not waiting until marriage. And we look at it not just in terms of, like I say, contraception, because really that will have been done earlier on in the school career, and the links between both of them. So we are beyond the basics at this point, and these are just some of the topics that we cover in Key Stage 5. I'll let you read those yourselves. We do go back, as we've got a spiral curriculum, and sort of refresh our students' memory of some of the things that they may have covered in Key Stage 4 and also Key Stage 3, but obviously with a more grown-up sort of language, and in terms of the tasks, they can be a little bit more sort of challenging. At Wolverhampton Grammar, we are really lucky with our time that we have, although in my previous school we did just work on tutor time. So it really depends on, you know, what your school is putting forward, what they're balancing with all of the other things that are going on. For us, we have one lesson a week at Key Stage 5, that's 50 minutes, and then we have tutor time as well. Careers is done separately in tutor time. So for PSHE and RSE, the lesson time is pretty much the big bulk of what we do. So online dating, revenge porn, misogyny, toxic masculinity, chemsex, emergency contraception, pregnancy options, boundaries, sexual practices, the incel community, rape and assault, and sexual identity. So I think, you know, we can see that they're just taking one of those is quite a lot, quite tricky for teachers to be delivering, and can ignite some very sensitive debates. So I'm happy to share whatever you need, whatever you find interesting. If you do find any of this interesting, I hope so. So this is what we do in terms of lessons for year 12 and then for year 13. I haven't included it in the PowerPoint, but I can include what we do in tutor time as well. So for us, we do have a small 7 teachers that teach PSHE. We call it Wellbeing, and we go beyond the statutory in Key Stage 3 and 4. So for us, really, it's just an extension of that in Key Stage 5. So you'll see some of the firm favourites for PSHE, things like drugs, but we've added extra things in there. For example, period poverty, linking that into the current cost of living crisis. We do some sort of work that goes on sort of whole school around that as well. So for example, at Christmas, when we're doing the food bank collection, we also have an aside and a collection for hygiene products that we can then donate to local charities. Look at pregnancy and miscarriage, fostering adoption, gender and identity. I mean, I'm not going to read them all for you. I'm sure you can see those for yourselves. We follow the 3 themes suggested by a lot of the major publishers of resources and by the PSHE Association in terms of health and wellbeing, relationships, which includes sex education, and then living in the wider world when we talk about getting ready for employment, finance, pay slips, and all of those other things. In addition, we have various wellbeing guest speakers. Some of these are specific to the Midlands, but there are lots of them that work nationally as well. I don't know if we have anybody listening in from the Midlands, but I'm happy to share anything that we do. So far this year, we've had Healthy Cooking on a Budget, which is a company called Ready Steady Cook. They work nationally, and that was fantastic. We linked that in with our house system. So we had year 12 students learning to cook on just a few ingredients and then pitching that so that it was for points, and the winner of the house, the winner of the event got some house points. So that was great fun. We don't do any sort of like cooking skills in our DT, so that went down really well. All of our 6th form do CPR first aid, which is something that we do also in lower school, and they all get a certificate from that. And your local air ambulance usually will do that for free, so that's quite a good way of getting first aid in. I certainly feel ill-equipped to teach first aid, so I always look for a way of finding an external speaker to do that for me. We've got LGBTQ plus Equality Just Like Us. They do online, very low cost as well, to speak to students about LGBTQ plus issues and identity. And then as I think Rachel was saying, or was it Bex was saying about responding to the local community, we look at statistics, what the crime rates are in the area. We look at social media trends to make sure that we're keeping up to date, and our curriculum is very responsive. You will see as you look through that hopefully we reflect social issues, but also an age appropriate ways of getting our students ready for the wider world. So you can see their pay slips as they start to get their start to have more part-time jobs, just understanding what a pay slip is. We've done quite a lot on sexual harassment and toxic masculinity. That's been obviously in the press a lot recently through various celebrities and social media influencers. And we don't really shy away from talking about any topic with our students. And we also have an opportunity for them to come to us and say, well, actually, you know, this is something that I've heard of, this is something I'd like to be included. But there's, I don't know if any of you have come across it, but there's a drink called Lean, which is a mixture of sort of cough syrup and various other like drugs that you could buy at the pharmacy over the counter, but when they're mixed together they create sort of a high. So some of the students were saying, you know, we want to know about this, what is this, and we added that to our curriculum. So that tells you a little bit about what we teach. So tricky topics, what I always say is to prepare for the unexpected. We have a safe classroom, and we talk to our students throughout their time at at Wolverhampton Grammar School about what is appropriate, what isn't appropriate. We have rules such as talk about the topic rather than the person. So by the time that they get to Key Stage 5, they're really used to that sort of way of debating and talking about topics. Obviously, beware of safeguarding. So our teachers who teach PSHE all have regular meetings with regards to safeguarding, because so much there is preventative actually, and about keeping our children safe. Impartiality is a huge thing as well. You know, we do a lot of CPD within the department about keeping our views impartial. Sometimes that's really difficult because we have our own views, our own opinions that we want to express. Sometimes the students can say things that we hugely disagree with, but to remember really that we are facilitators there in the debate. And whilst we can guide them in terms of UK law, British values, our own personal opinions really are not the thing to be discussed. The way I teach is I really like to talk about situations that I've encountered. So there's no problem in talking about experiences, you know, and I think it actually brings it to life to the students, but always keeping it impartial. So I did some CPD recently with my department, and we looked at why we're impartial and some situations where we tested ourselves about impartiality. So for example, there was a student recently that talking about it sort of got quite political, and they were talking about Donald Trump and the situation that's going on in America, that as he's facing more and more criminal charges, he's also increased in popularity. So my own view of Donald Trump matches probably a lot of people's, that he's a little bit of an unsavoury character, but I didn't share that with my group in front of me. We talked instead of about, okay, so why do you think lots of Americans are voting for Donald Trump? That's an example of how, you know, you can bring that back into the classroom to the students and ask them to really evaluate what they're talking about, and critical thinking. So one skill that we really try to foster, you know, within our lessons. It's not always easy, but it's really important. We have a lot of other tricky topics. I think one that comes out a lot when I go to PSHE conferences around the country is things around gender and LGBTQ. And probably for many PSHE teachers, it's that fear of saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing. and also of offending other people. People don't want to be offending anybody. And what I would certainly recommend is to just keep in mind what UK law is, bring it back to the Equality Act. All schools are places that are anti-discrimination. They're inclusive places where people should be able to feel free and safe to express themselves. I have had those conversations with parents. They may have religious views or particular viewpoints of their own. They feel uncomfortable about some of the topics that we teach. What I found is that, yeah, pretty much without exception, once the parents are in and they look at the resources that you're using, look at how we teach it, it's not in any way promoting a particular kind of lifestyle, which seems to be the fear. And I think something that we see a lot every time I turn on the TV, GMB or you know, radio, they're talking about what schools are doing and how we're encouraging this and encouraging that, and just sort of putting the parents' minds at rest, really, that what we're teaching is kindness and we're preparing them for the workplace. So that is another really sensitive topic, I guess, with within school, but I think with communication it can be well managed. Another way that we deal with some of those really sensitive topics is to offer a space for questions beyond the classroom. So every lunchtime, we're quite fortunate. We have quite a long lunch at my school. We have an hour, and that gives them time to take part in various lunch clubs. But half of that lunchtime, every lunchtime, is staffed so that the children can go and talk about any of the topics that we've covered in our wellbeing lessons. Obviously, every school has to work with whatever timetable and whatever they may have. You know, my last school, we had 25 minutes for lunch, so that wasn't possible. But there are other ways of doing things, break times and so on, or perhaps online ways of asking questions. We've used that before. We use the toot system, if anybody's heard of that. So children can ask questions, older students can ask any questions, and they can get back an answer online. Sometimes I think we can all be asked questions by students who are looking for a little bit of a reaction. We've got the comedians in the classroom, we've got the ones that want to provoke, and something that I tend to do quite a lot in terms of managing that is to turn the question back. So, for example, if a question is, you know, what I'm trying to think of some examples. You know, I was asked recently, you know, Miss, is sperm red? So I think they clearly knew that sperm wasn't red. You know, they were trying to get reaction, but, you know, kept my calm and just said, well, you know, what do you think? Do you think it is? Or what colour do you think it might be? And ask it back. That usually knocks the stuffing out of them enough to be able to not have that audience anymore. And if it's a really genuine question, I think we can usually tell that quite by the students' way that they put the question forward. But yeah, certainly turning the question back helps. If you feel that the question's too personal, then, you know, I'm really honest and I say, well, you know, as a teacher, I can't really answer that question. Why do you think I can't answer that question? And, you know, at Key Stage 5, generally, that sort of behaviour tends to have settled down a little bit. And it's certainly not a problem for us. I think when you're talking about tricky topics, particularly when you're talking about sex, and this is the same for Key Stage 3, 4 or 5, you need to expect that, you know, the kids are going to find it funny, and just embrace that, really, and sort of have, you know, use a little bit of humour where is appropriate. So just a few ideas on questioning. Don't use judgment. Don't be afraid to use humour, as I've just said. Put questions out to the whole group. Be impartial. Impartial is our middle name in my department. Sometimes when teachers have been caught out, it's because they've just let that slip a little bit. And I think we've all heard the horror stories of teachers being recorded and then that recording being shared on TikTok and so on. I don't worry about that. And I don't worry about that because I know that I remain impartial and I'm there to facilitate that debate and to give factual knowledge. based on statistics, based on UK law, based on the values and ethos of the school. So beware of sharing too much. Like I say, I do share a little bit, but certainly nothing that would be very, very private. If I talk about other people, I never give a name, and I tell the students that they should do the same thing too. Right, so in terms of resources, as has been mentioned, there are some off-the-shelf resource packages, if you like, that you can buy. One of them, which I found really, really good, is the Key Stage 5 development package by Creative Resources. That's the larger sort of graphic there. And what I really like about that is that it's fully editable. So it gives you a good starting point, particularly if PSHE is one of many jobs that you do, as is often the case in schools. But it gives you a starting point that you can then edit, that you can mix and match, you can use for your own, you can cater towards your own needs within your school, you can have it match your own teaching and learning policy. But it, for example, provides learning journeys there. It provides work booklets already made up that, again, you can edit. All of the resources have videos that the links don't break because they're made by the company themselves. So that's a really, really good company that I would recommend. I have no affiliation with them whatsoever. So that is a genuine recommendation. The other resource package that I've found really useful, and actually this one's a little bit cheaper if budgets are a little bit tighter, is E&C Publishing. So they, again, provide booklets, homework, projects, fully mapped out lessons, schemes of work, everything is there. And for like a few £100, you can get that and then edit it to use as you wish. Now, you know, I've seen schools that just pick these up and just use them, and I understand why that is. I think it's not necessarily great practice. I think that, as has been mentioned, you look at those and then see how you can adapt them for what's going on at the time, what the local trends are, what the national trends are, but it's that great starting point. I add to that with lots of resources from various organisations. I'm sure you're all very familiar with the PSHE Association and Brooke and the Family Planning Association, obviously NatWest, MoneyWise. There's lots of different areas, and then we bring those resources together to create our own schemes and our own resources that use those as a starting point. I think that pretty much brings me to an end of what I wanted to say, but I'm very happy to answer any questions. Sorry if I speak really quickly. I'm trying to get a lot into a short amount of time.
Okay, Maggie, thank you very much. The only real question that we've got come through is from Sarah regarding the fact that she works in a special school and she would like some support for teaching age-appropriate topics, but for pupils with cognition problems working at year 1 or year 2. I think from my point of view, I think the first place that you should go with that is to your SENCO, and to take the resources to your SENCO for them to have a look at them and for them to sort of pick out to collectively together. You know, you're picking out what are the real key needs, what are the real key things that those students need to take from that information. And in my experience, I think it's Brooke Advisory, and I can't remember off the top of my head, there is another company where there were lots of videos produced, and there was a video that was just for teaching at that age group, and then there was also a video that was teaching the same subject but for students who were maybe had sort of specifically on the ASD, so that the language was really clear rather than using any sort of colloquialisms or euphemisms and things like that. And then there was also a video teaching exactly the same thing, where it brought it right back down to the very, very basics for those who were working at a level much below their age group. And I'm certain that Brooke was one of those, and there was another one to do with online safety. I think it's CEOP that has resources that are sort of differentiated in that way. Maggie, do you have any other?
Yeah, if I can add to that, some of the resource packages, so they're obviously aimed at Key Stage 5, but those companies do offer packages for different sort of learning needs within all of the lessons, the PowerPoints that they put forward, which, as I said, you can adapt. There are different levels of challenge within the lessons. I think it's like any other subject, and this is sort of our mantra really, is that PSHE needs to be treated like any other subject in terms of, you know, what's your teaching and learning policy? What do you do in terms of perhaps word maths or sentence starters, keywords, that kind of thing. But yeah, that there are resources out there, not necessarily always for free, but there are resources out there that differentiate, and really any resources that we make ourselves should have different levels of challenging anyway, I would argue, as teachers.
I think also
Hope
it's
that helps a little bit.
Yeah, thank you, Maggie. I think it's also important to kind of register that the PSHE should be taught at age appropriate, and therefore if a child is working significantly below their age, that actually maybe just using resources that are designed for students of that age group. So I don't see any reason why you couldn't address some of those some of the content by using resources that are designed for somebody who is working at year 7 or year 4, and having a look and seeing what's already out there at that level on that topic, because those resources should be appropriate for those students working at that level. So it is really important to tweak your curriculum. It's definitely within my school. There's stuff that, you know, lots of companies say, oh, we teach that at year 8. Actually, for our students, we need to pull that forward, and we need to be teaching that in year 7 to our students because of the demographic of students that we've got. And so there's still that kind of flexibility within it. There's no hard and fast rule as to when stuff should be taught. So yeah, maybe consider using resources that are designed for students at year 1, year 2, and seeing how, you know, how they can support you and help you. I'm conscious of time.